Imagine a sailor standing on the deck of a creaking ship, waves rising like breathing mountains, clouds swallowing the stars. No sun, no moon, no landmarks, just the rhythm of the sea and the fear of drifting into nothingness. For a long time, that was the edge of the world. Then a quiet idea emerged, so small you could hold it in your hand, and it changed the way humans moved across the planet. This is the story of the compass, and it begins not on a ship, but in a room lit by oil lamps in ancient China. Picture a polished plate and a spoon carved from a strange, heavy stone that seemed to carry its own inner pull. People called it lodestone. When placed on the plate, the spoon's handle would always settle toward the south. In the time of the Han Dynasty, roughly 200 years before Christ to 100 years after Christ, this was more than a tool. It was a whisper from the earth itself. At first, the south-pointing spoon did not guide sailors. It guided lives. Think of a builder, carefully aligning a temple or a tomb, so it sat in harmony with wind, water, and the breath of the land. Those early compasses were instruments of balance and intention. They were used by thinkers who believed that a home or a resting place could either calm the spirit or disturb it, depending on how it met the invisible currents beneath the sky. But curiosity is stubborn. Somewhere along the line, a question stirred. If this stone can point true on a table, what could it do at sea? Generations later, during the Song era, Chinese mariners began to float magnetized needles on water. Imagine the moment a sailor leaned close to a bowl on a swaying deck, watching a sliver of metal tremble, then settle into its quiet truth. No clouds could smother it. No fog could trick it. In that small circle of water, a path appeared. Of course, secrets like this do not stay hidden forever. Traders carried stories along spice routes and over desert tracks. A rumor here, a demonstration there. By the time the idea reached the Middle East and then Europe, it felt both wondrous and unsettling. Some people looked at a needle that could find its way without sun or star and felt uneasy. If the heavens guided us, what did it mean for a tiny piece of metal to do the same? There were whispers and accusations. Some called it unnatural. Some called it unworthy of trust. Meanwhile, sailors kept watching the sea, and the sea kept asking the same hard question. Do you dare go farther? For a long while, European captains clung to coasts, trusting memory and familiar winds. But commerce is a relentless teacher. As trade widened and ambitions grew, the little needle on water gained a place on the deck. It did not shout or boast, it simply pointed. With it, new routes opened, risks became imaginable, and the world's edges began to fold inward. There is a quieter story tucked inside the grand one. The compass did not erase fear. It gave people a way to carry fear alongside courage. Imagine a crew weeks into a voyage, food carefully rationed, tempers fragile. The sky is gray for days, no birds, no fires on distant shores. Then the navigator checks the needle, traces a bearing, and says, "We are still on course." In that moment, the compass is not just a device. It is a promise that the invisible can be trusted. Little-known truths linger in its history. Early Chinese scholars treated magnetism as a natural companion to order and design. Arab navigators paired the compass with star knowledge, weaving two ways of knowing into one practice. European mapmakers learned slowly and with many mistakes to sketch coastlines that matched what the needle whispered. Across cultures, the compass did not erase tradition, it braided new learning into old wisdom. The more you look at it, the more human the story becomes. It is not only about ships and empires, it is about people asking, how do we move through uncertainty without losing ourselves? A spoon of lodestone on a polished plate, a needle floating in a bowl, an instrument cradled in the hand of someone who must decide whether to turn back or keep going. The compass did not reach into the future and drag humanity forward. It sat quietly and allowed us to choose our direction with a little more confidence. And maybe that is why this invention matters so much. It began as a tool for harmony, not conquest. It taught builders to listen to the land. It taught sailors to read the breath of the earth when the sky fell silent. It transformed fear into focus. Step by step, voyage by voyage, it helped distant peoples find each other, for better and for worse, and reminded us that truth can be steady even when everything else is moving. If you love history as much as we do, and you want to keep following the threads that connect small inventions to sweeping human stories like this video, share it with a friend who enjoys a good tale, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires. There is so much more to explore, and the compass is just the beginning. Picture this. You're standing in an ancient Chinese palace courtyard around 200 years before Christ was born. The air is thick with incense, and a man in silk robes kneels beside what looks like a bronze plate covered in mysterious symbols. In the center sits something that would make you do a double take. A spoon made from a strange, dark stone that seems to have a mind of its own. This wasn't just any spoon. This was the South Pointer, and it was about to change the world in ways no one could imagine. The Chinese called this magnetic stone qi shi, meaning loving stone, because of how it seemed drawn to certain directions like a lover to their beloved. But here's what's absolutely fascinating. They didn't create this device to help sailors find their way across treacherous seas. No, they built it for something far more mystical. Imagine being a feng shui master in ancient China. Your job was to read the invisible forces that flowed through the earth, to find the perfect harmony between heaven and earth. The Chinese believed that everything in the universe was connected by an energy they called qi, and this energy flowed in currents beneath our feet, just like rivers flow above ground. So when an emperor wanted to build a new palace, or when a wealthy merchant needed to choose the perfect spot for his family tomb, they would call upon these masters. Out would come the South Pointer, placed carefully on its bronze divination board covered with symbols representing the constellations, the elements, and the directions of the cosmic winds. The master would watch, almost holding his breath, as that mysterious spoon slowly turned and settled, always pointing toward magnetic south. To them, it wasn't just finding a direction, it was reading the very pulse of the earth itself. They believed that by aligning their most sacred buildings with these magnetic forces, they could tap into the universe's natural harmony and bring prosperity, health, and good fortune to everyone inside. What makes this story even more incredible is that while these ancient Chinese masters were consulting their magnetic spoons to commune with cosmic forces, they had no idea they were holding the key to humanity's future exploration of the world. They couldn't have imagined that this simple tool would one day guide brave sailors across vast oceans to discover new continents. For centuries, the South Pointer remained China's mystical secret, used in temples and palaces to divine the will of heaven. The craftsmen who made these devices were like ancient magicians, carefully selecting pieces of lodestone, this naturally magnetic rock they found in certain mountains, and shaping them into spoons that would spin and dance on their bronze plates. But here's what's truly amazing about human ingenuity. While they started with mysticism, they ended up with one of the most practical inventions in all of human history. Those feng shui masters, trying to read the spiritual map of the universe, had actually discovered the Earth's magnetic field. They just didn't know it yet. The South Pointer wasn't just a tool. It was a bridge between the ancient world's spiritual wisdom and the scientific discoveries that would reshape civilization. Every time one of those bronze spoons settled into position, pointing steadily southward, it was quietly proving that our planet itself is like a giant magnet, with invisible lines of force flowing from pole to pole. And all of this happened in dusty courtyards and incense-filled temples, where men in silk robes knelt in reverence, believing they were consulting with the gods themselves. Fast forward about 1,000 years, and something extraordinary was happening in China during what we call the Song Dynasty, around the 11th century after Christ. Picture yourself walking through the bustling ports of ancient China, where the air is filled with the scent of exotic spices and the sound of merchants haggling in a dozen different languages. Here's where our story takes an incredible turn. Those sacred spoons that feng shui masters had been using in their temples for centuries, Chinese sailors were about to transform them into something that would revolutionize how humans explored the world. Imagine being one of these innovative sailors. You're tired of hugging the coastline, afraid to venture too far into the open sea because once you lose sight of land, you're essentially gambling with your life. But you've heard whispers about the temple masters and their magical pointing spoons. What if there was a way to bring that magic aboard your ship? The breakthrough came when someone, and we wish we knew exactly who this genius was, realized they could take a regular sewing needle, rub it against a piece of lodestone until it became magnetic, and then let it float on a piece of cork in a bowl of water. Suddenly, that mystical temple ceremony became portable maritime science. Can you imagine the first time a Chinese captain watched that floating needle settle into position, pointing steadily in the same direction no matter which way his ship turned? It must have felt like discovering fire all over again. Here was a tool that could guide them across the vast Pacific, past islands they'd never seen, toward trading opportunities they'd only dreamed of. But here's what makes this story so fascinating. The Chinese didn't just casually share this world-changing invention. They guarded it like their lives depended on it, because in many ways it did. This magnetic needle gave them a massive advantage in trade and exploration. While other civilizations were still afraid to venture far from shore, Chinese fleets were crossing entire oceans with confidence. For generations, this remained China's closely held secret. Chinese merchants would sail into foreign ports with impossible accuracy, arriving exactly where they intended to go, and other traders could only wonder how they managed such precise navigation. It was like having a superpower that nobody else understood. Then came the moment that changed everything. Arab traders, those incredible middlemen who connected East and West through the ancient Silk Road and sea routes, finally managed to learn the secret. Maybe a Chinese sailor let something slip during a late-night conversation in a foreign port. Maybe an Arab merchant was observant enough to notice something unusual about how Chinese ships navigated. We'll never know exactly how it happened, but somehow the secret escaped. When these Arab traders brought the compass to Europe, the reaction was absolutely incredible to imagine. Picture yourself as a medieval European sailor, raised on stories of sea monsters and the edge of the world. Suddenly, some foreign merchant shows you a needle floating in water, claiming it will always point north, no matter where you are. Your first thought? This has to be witchcraft. The fear was so intense that people started calling it the devil's needle. Think about it from their perspective. How could a simple piece of metal know which direction was north unless some supernatural force was guiding it? In an age when most people believed that invisible spirits controlled every aspect of the natural world, a self-directing needle seemed like undeniable proof of dark magic. The church was particularly suspicious. Here was this foreign invention that seemed to possess knowledge that only God should have. How could a mere needle know things that human beings couldn't figure out without divine guidance? Some religious leaders genuinely worried that using the compass meant making a pact with evil forces. But you know what's beautiful about human nature? Curiosity and practicality eventually won out over fear. European sailors, desperate to improve their dangerous profession, slowly began to experiment with these mysterious needles. And once they realized that the compass actually made their voyages safer, not more dangerous, everything changed. What started as temple mysticism in ancient China had become cutting-edge maritime technology, and it was about to unlock an age of exploration that would reshape the entire world. Those floating needles would soon guide European ships to the Americas, around Africa, and across every ocean on Earth. This incredible journey from temple ceremony to global exploration shows us something profound about how human knowledge grows and spreads. An invention that began with spiritual seekers trying to harmonize with cosmic forces ended up giving practical sailors the confidence to venture into the unknown and connect distant civilizations. If you're fascinated by how these ancient innovations rippled through history to shape our modern world, you're exactly the kind of curious mind that makes exploring these stories so rewarding. Then comment your thoughts, like the video, share it with fellow history lovers, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more epic journeys. There's something magical about tracing how a simple discovery in one culture can eventually transform the entire course of human civilization. And there are so many more of these incredible connections waiting to be discovered. Picture this incredible contrast happening in the world during the 13th and 14th centuries after Christ. While European sailors were still hugging their familiar coastlines, terrified to lose sight of land, massive Chinese treasure fleets were boldly crossing the Indian Ocean with a confidence that seemed almost supernatural to outside observers. Imagine standing on the docks of a Chinese port during this time, watching these enormous ships, some over 400 feet long, setting sail with crews of hundreds of men. These weren't just trading vessels. They were floating cities equipped with everything needed for months-long voyages across open water. And at the heart of their navigation system was that simple floating needle that had evolved from temple ceremonies centuries earlier. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in Europe, sailors were living in a completely different world. Picture a European merchant captain in the same era, carefully studying the coastline, memorizing every distinctive rock formation and inlet. When storms pushed him off course, he had to rely on prayer, luck, and whatever glimpses of stars he could catch through the clouds. The idea of sailing straight across an ocean, out of sight of any landmark, was simply unthinkable. But here's what makes this story so human and relatable. Change is always scary, especially when it challenges everything you think you know about the world. Even after Arab traders brought the compass to Europe, most sailors looked at it with deep suspicion. Can you imagine their internal struggle? Here was a tool that could potentially revolutionize their profession, but it required them to trust something they didn't understand, something that felt like magic. The breakthrough came gradually, and it happened because of something very human: economic pressure. As trade routes expanded and merchants realized there was serious money to be made in distant lands, some brave captains started quietly experimenting with these mysterious needles. They'd probably test them on short trips first, maybe sailing just out of sight of land for a few hours, watching to see if that floating needle really did what the Arab traders claimed. Imagine the first time a European captain successfully used a compass to navigate back to port after being caught in a storm that had completely disoriented him. The relief, the amazement, the sudden realization that this little device had just saved his life and his cargo. It must have been a life-changing moment. But the real transformation happened when word spread among the merchant community. Success stories traveled fast in the tight-knit world of medieval trade. Soon, captains who had once called the compass the devil's needle were quietly asking where they could get one for themselves. And this is where our story connects to one of the most famous names in history, Christopher Columbus. Now here's something that might surprise you. Columbus wasn't some reckless adventurer sailing blindly into the unknown. He was actually a calculated risk-taker who understood exactly how revolutionary the compass was for ocean navigation. Think about Columbus's famous voyage in 1492. Without the compass, his plan to sail west across the Atlantic would have been pure suicide. How could he possibly maintain a consistent westward course across thousands of miles of open ocean without any landmarks? How would he know he wasn't sailing in circles or gradually curving north toward the Arctic or south toward regions where no European had ever returned? The compass gave Columbus something that no previous generation of European explorers had ever possessed: the confidence to sail into the complete unknown and trust that he could find his way back home. That little floating needle became his lifeline to the familiar world, even when he was farther from land than any European had ever been. But here's what's truly fascinating to consider. Without the compass, the entire timeline of world history would have been completely different. The Americas might have remained unknown to Europeans for centuries longer. The great age of exploration that connected distant continentations might have been delayed by generations. The cultural exchanges, the scientific discoveries, the economic transformations that followed Columbus's voyage, all of it hinged on European sailors finally trusting a Chinese invention they had initially feared. It's incredible to think that a device originally created for reading cosmic forces in ancient Chinese temples ended up being the key that unlocked global exploration for an entirely different civilization. This shows us something profound about how human knowledge works. Innovations don't just stay where they're invented. They travel, they adapt, they get reimagined by new cultures for purposes their original creators never imagined. The compass reminds us that the tools which seem most natural to us today were once revolutionary breakthroughs that required enormous courage to embrace. Those European merchants and sailors who first dared to trust their lives to a floating needle were taking a leap of faith that would ultimately reshape the entire world. What started as temple mysticism in ancient China had become the technological foundation for an age of discovery that would connect every corner of our planet. And it all happened because people were willing to overcome their fears and trust in something they didn't fully understand but couldn't deny actually worked. So here we are at the end of this incredible journey, and I have to pause for a moment to appreciate just how amazing this story really is. Think about it. We started with ancient Chinese masters kneeling in temple courtyards, consulting a magnetic spoon to read the cosmic forces flowing through the earth. We watched that mystical ceremony transform into a practical navigation tool that gave sailors the courage to cross entire oceans. And we ended with European explorers using that same basic principle to discover new continents and reshape the entire world. But what strikes me most about this story is how it reveals something profound about human nature and the way knowledge moves through our world. That simple compass shows us that the most transformative inventions often begin in the most unexpected places, serving purposes their creators never imagined. Those feng shui masters who first watched a lodestone spoon spin on its bronze plate were seeking spiritual harmony, trying to align buildings with the universe's natural energy. They had no idea they were unlocking the secret that would eventually allow humans to navigate every ocean on Earth. They couldn't have imagined that their temple ceremony would one day guide Columbus to the Americas or help European merchants build trading empires that spanned the globe. And here's what gives me chills when I really think about it. This pattern is happening around us all the time. Right now, there are probably inventions being developed for one purpose that will end up revolutionizing something completely different. There are discoveries being made in laboratories and workshops that seem small and specialized today, but might change the course of civilization tomorrow. The compass also teaches us something beautiful about how human cultures learn from each other. This wasn't just a Chinese invention that stayed in China. It traveled along trade routes, adapted by Arab merchants, feared, and then embraced by European sailors. Each culture that encountered it added something new, found different ways to use it, improved upon the original design. This makes me wonder, what other ancient innovations are still guiding us today in ways we don't even realize? When you use GPS on your phone, you're still following the same basic principle that those Chinese masters discovered over 2,000 years ago, using invisible forces to determine direction and location. When architects design buildings today, many still consider the principles of feng shui that first led to the compass's creation. The compass story reminds us that human ingenuity is like a river that flows across continents and through centuries. Ideas that start in one place and time can end up transforming completely different societies in ways no one could predict. The mystical becomes practical. The local becomes global, and what begins as a solution to one problem often ends up solving challenges that hadn't even been imagined yet. It also shows us the importance of being open to ideas that might seem strange or foreign at first. Those European sailors who initially called the compass the devil's needle eventually realized that their fear was keeping them from embracing something that could save their lives and expand their horizons. How many opportunities do we miss because we're too quick to dismiss what we don't immediately understand? Perhaps the most powerful lesson from this ancient story is that the tools which reshape civilization often start small and simple. A magnetized needle floating in water doesn't look like world-changing technology, but it gave humans the confidence to explore unknown territories and connect distant cultures. It makes you wonder what seemingly simple innovations around us today might be the keys to humanity's next great leap forward. If you find yourself as fascinated by these connections between ancient wisdom and modern life as I am, then you understand why exploring these historical stories is so rewarding. What lessons can we draw from this ancient tradition? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more untold stories of the ancient world. There's something magical about tracing how a single discovery can ripple through time and across cultures, eventually touching lives in ways its original creators never dreamed possible. These tales from the ancient world aren't just interesting history. They're blueprints for understanding how human progress really works, how innovation spreads, and how the curiosity and courage of people from long ago continue to shape our world today. Every time we dig into these stories, we discover new insights about the endless creativity and resilience of the human spirit, and perhaps we find inspiration for our own contributions to this ongoing story of discovery and connection.